So, you want to own a truck stop. Think about the customer base. Every long-haul truck in the country runs on diesel, and it has to stop to fill up, over and over, forever. Millions of drivers, 100 million cars on top of them, all needing fuel, food, and a bathroom on the same highways. You sit at the exit and sell them the one thing none of them can skip. It sounds like the safest business on the road. It is not. Fuel is around 80% of a truck stop's revenue, and fuel barely makes any money at all. One of the biggest chains in America recently earned a profit of about $190 million on $42 billion in sales. That is a margin of less than 0.5%. You can pump a river of diesel and keep almost none of it. So how does anyone get rich on this? Why is the fuel the least important part? And why did one Texas chain get so good at this business that it banned trucks completely? The buy-in, 3 ways in, and they cost wildly different amounts. Way 1. You build one. A single small truck stop can be financed with a government-backed loan of up to $5 million. But a modern mega travel center is a different animal. One new build recently sat on a 28-acre parcel of land that cost $6.5 million by itself before a single pump went in. Way 2. You buy a chain, and the giants have been changing hands fast. In 2023, the oil major BP bought TravelCenters of America for $1.3 billion, $86 a share, picking up around 280 sites across 44 states. And in January 2024, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway bought the final piece of Pilot and now owns the whole chain outright. Way 3. You do not buy the real estate. You franchise a brand or operate a site for someone else. But hold on to way 1 and 2, because they hide the real question. When BP bought TravelCenters, around 70% of that company's gross profit came from its convenience business, not its fuel. That oil major bought a truck stop chain mostly for the store, not the pump. What you inherit. Buy a truck stop and 4 things come attached. First, a commodity gamble. Your biggest revenue line is fuel, and fuel prices swing with the global oil market, which you do not control. Fuel margins bounce on either side of 15 cents a gallon, and in a good stretch they can jump to nearly 30. You are strapped to a number set on the other side of the planet. Second, location, and it is unforgiving. A truck stop lives and dies on being right at the interstate exit. A few hundred yards too far, or one exit too early, and the trucks roll straight past. You are buying a spot far more than a building. Third, the tanks. Underground fuel tanks are an environmental liability with strict rules and expensive monitoring. A leak is not a repair, it is a catastrophe. And fourth, the parking. For decades, truck parking was free, a courtesy for drivers buying fuel. Now, parking is scarce, and increasingly something owners charge for, one of the quiet new revenue lines in the business. The revenue layers, D, 5 ways this thing pays, and they are stacked in a very specific order. Number 1, fuel. Enormous volume, razor-thin margin. It is most of your revenue and almost none of your profit. Number 2, and this is the actual business, the store itself. Snacks, drinks, hot food, coffee, and merchandise, all sold at fat convenience store margins to a captive customer who just filled a 100-gallon tank and walked inside. Number 3, food service. Sit-down and quick-service restaurants. TravelCenters ran more than 600 restaurants across its network. Number 4, showers. A trucker living on the road will pay for a hot, clean shower, and many stops give it free with a fuel purchase, which pulls the fuel sale in. Number 5, everything else that keeps a driver on site. Truck scales, tire service, repair bays, truck washes, laundry, and paid reserved parking. Every one of them keeps the driver parked longer, and a parked driver spends money inside. Now here is the number that flips the whole business over. Listen to that again. Fuel is around 80% of the revenue, but it is not where the money is made. At TravelCenters, roughly 70% of the gross profit came from the convenience and service side, not the fuel. Pilot, a chain doing about $42 billion in sales, turned a pre-tax profit of only around $190 million because the fuel that makes up most of that revenue earns almost nothing. Listen to that again. The pump is not the business. It is the bait. Fuel exists to pull a driver off the highway and park him 10 steps from a bag of jerky and a hot coffee. And that is where the profit actually lives. One company understood this so completely that it did the unthinkable. It banned trucks. Buc-ee's, the Texas chain, says that about 2/3 of its revenue comes from inside sales, food, snacks, and merchandise. That is the exact inverse of the normal truck stop. They built enormous stores, filled them with branded snacks people drive out of their way for, and then refused to let a single 18-wheeler park, because 18-wheelers take up space and do not buy fudge. They turned the store into the whole point and threw the trucks away. You do not sell fuel. You use fuel to sell everything else. The ledger. So what does it cost to run one? Start with fuel itself, which you buy at a commodity price and resell for pennies of margin. Get the timing wrong on a tanker load in a moving market, and your thin margin turns negative. Then, credit card fees. When a driver pays with a card on a $200 fuel purchase, the card fee can eat a huge slice of your already tiny fuel margin. It is such a problem that the industry lobbies over it constantly. Then labor. A big travel center runs around the clock and needs a lot of people. Buc-ee's is famous for paying above the market, cashiers starting around $18 an hour, because clean, fast-staffed stores are the entire product. Then the tanks, the maintenance, the enormous inventory in the store, property tax, and the lot itself. Here is the strange shape of this ledger. What brings the people in, fuel, barely pays. And the thing that pays, the store, cannot exist without the fuel to bring the people. You are running two businesses, bolted together, and if you ever confuse which one is the profit engine, you are finished. The trap. Tira. Here is the trap, and it has ruined bigger companies than yours. Your largest revenue line is a commodity you cannot control, sold at a margin so thin there is almost no cushion under you. When oil is calm, that is survivable. When oil goes wild, or when you borrow heavily against those fuel volumes, one bad swing can wipe out a whole year. And there is a deeper version of the trap. Because so much money flows across a truck stopping fuel, owners are tempted to reach further up the oil chain, into trading, storage, even refining, chasing the fuel margin instead of minding the store. That is exactly where the biggest collapse in this industry came from. The truck stops were never the problem. The bet on oil around them was. The man who built the first one. In 1982, a Texas A&M graduate named Aplin, nicknamed Beaver, opened a small gas station in Clute, Texas. His whole business plan was two rules: sell cheap ice and keep the bathrooms clean. That first store was 3,000 square feet with 2 gas pumps, financed with a $250,000 loan. For 20 years, he tinkered with it. Then, in 2003, he opened his first travel center in Luling and introduced the things that would define the brand. Barbecue, branded t-shirts, a caramel corn snack called Beaver nuggets, and a strict rule that no 18-wheeler would ever park there. It worked beyond anything the industry had seen. Revenue climbed from $63 million in 2001 to $959 million by 2015. In 2012, he opened a store with 68,000 square feet, 120 fuel pumps, and 83 toilets, the largest convenience store on Earth at the time. Today, the chain is estimated to bring in $3 to $5 billion a year, and it is still privately owned by Aplin and his partner. He did it by understanding before almost anyone that the store was the business, and the fuel was just the reason to stop. He built a cathedral to the inside sale, and the trucks were never invited. The biggest failure. Now the other direction. A company that had the truck stops right and bet on the fuel, and lost everything. Flying J, founded by a man named J. Call, grew into one of the 20 largest private companies in America, with around $18 billion in revenue and 14,000 employees running more than 250 travel plazas. But Flying J was not just a truck stop chain. It was also an oil refiner, with refineries, a pipeline, and an oil and gas arm. It had reached up the chain, chasing the fuel. Then, in late 2008, oil collapsed. Crude fell from nearly $147 a barrel to around $30 in months, and the credit markets froze at the same moment. Flying J's refining bet and its stretched balance sheet could not survive the double hit. In December 2008, the company filed for bankruptcy. Here is the part that matters. Its truck stops themselves were fine. They kept running, kept selling, and did not even plan layoffs. What had blown up was the oil business wrapped around them and the debt. Flying J sold off its refining and pipeline assets, merged its travel centers with Pilot in 2010 to form Pilot Flying J, and repaid its creditors $1.4 billion in full. Those stores never stopped. The bet on the commodity nearly destroyed the whole thing. How the survivors do it. 5 habits, straight out of what you just saw. Habit 1. The store is the business. Fuel is the doorway. Every decision serves getting the driver parked and inside, because that is where the margin is. Habit 2. Do not gamble on the fuel. Flying J reached up the oil chain, and it nearly ended them. Sell the diesel, take the thin margin, and do not bet the company on the price of crude. Habit 3. Location, then location. Right at the exit, on the busy side, easy in and easy out. A great operator in a bad spot still loses. Habit 4. Own the experience. Buc-ee's built a cult on clean bathrooms and branded snacks. Brand and store margins are the moat, not the fuel price, which anyone can match. Habit 5. Keep the balance sheet sane. Fuel margins are so thin, there is no room for heavy debt on top of it. The moment a commodity swing hits a leveraged operator, it is over. Does this actually work? Both years, clearly. Take the good year. Traffic is strong, fuel margins are healthy, maybe pushing toward 30 cents a gallon, and the store is packed with drivers buying high-margin food and merchandise. Fuel covers the ground, and the store prints the profit. This is why BP paid over $1 billion for TravelCenters, and Berkshire bought all of Pilot. At scale, the model is a machine. Now the bad year. Oil whipsaws your fuel margin turns thin or negative, card fees grind at it, and if you picked a weak location or piled on debt, there is no cushion to absorb the hit. And if you got greedy and bet on the commodity itself, you get Flying J. Look at the two ends. Buc-ee's banned the trucks, made the store 2/3 of its revenue, and became a multi-billion-dollar cult. Flying J leaned into the fuel, reached into refining, and went bankrupt while its truck stops ran perfectly fine. Same industry. Opposite bet. One sold snacks, the other sold a commodity. So does it work? Yes, if you treat it as a retail and real estate business with a fuel magnet out front, own your location, and keep your debt low. And no, if you treat it as a fuel business, because the fuel is the one part that barely makes money. Every part of this points at the same quiet truth. That pump was never the business. Arch Aplin built his empire on cheap ice and clean bathrooms, banned the trucks, and sells caramel corn to families for billions of dollars a year. Flying J sold fuel and refined oil, and when the commodity turned, the company collapsed, while the truck stops themselves never missed a day. BP paid $1.3 billion, and Berkshire bought Pilot whole because the pump is just a doorway, and the doorway leads to a store. You never really sold fuel. Fuel was the bait. Your business was everything that happened after the driver pulled off the highway, parked, and walked inside. A pump is the cheapest thing on the lot. The cash register, just past it, is the entire point.